asked if we should leave meetings or call while driving to meet the deadline. Turns out those are exceptions. We had a policy like that. Our warehouse had a bunch of issues one day and we were trying to solve it, while higher ups were calling us to let us know our warehouse was having issues. You'd be on the phone with Bruce, your manager, to tell him what Dave from the warehouse said. And then Jack from head office calls Bruce to tell him what I said from Dave, and Bruce calls Dave to tell him that he's aware of the issue. I think I totaled 30 phone calls. And I was just a regular worker. It was just a giant circle, and afterwards, the policy was removed. For a short time I was allowed to do the morning announcements over the PA at school. When the law program was putting on a mock trial, the script highlighted a love affair between the accused and defendant. After that, I wasn't allowed to do the announcements, and no one was allowed to use the word intercourse in any context. Intrigue. Deceit. Intercourse. Slow fading into coerce. Other gems. The track team beat a 4-year-old record last week. My radio career peaked at 16. No playing Halo on the school computers. I had uploaded it to the school shared directory, and before I knew it, half the school was playing in computer labs. We had Halo and Counter-Strike. We would have class battles every day. High school was fun. We no longer do pay advances under any circumstances. Company owner blindsided me a month ago with a demotion from general manager and handed it to his brother-in-law. I'm a single dad who took a 30% pay cut to work for this company because I believed we could truly scale it up and work wonders. My demotion was a 23% pay cut, and basically I figured out the new pay rate won't cover bills. Rent was due last Sunday the 1st, we get paid that Monday, the 2nd. I asked him Friday to help me out so I wasn't late on rent. He comes to me end of day that Friday saying he has to hit me with a 10% fee for an advance. Hell no. Next company meeting we all had to sign documentation understanding the company won't do any advances. Currently job hunting. My small university began to properly train undergraduate students the pillars of chemical safety after I was involved in a chemical accident in their labs that landed me in the ER. They still have my clothes from the incident that they show off to freshman chemists. I am still a chemist today and actually lead a laboratory safety group at my graduate university. I guess the incident scared everyone straight. Not a rule, but the entire athletic department of the large university I worked at had to attend a mandatory compliance meeting because I gave a quarter to an athlete who was barely short on getting something from the vending machine. Zero tolerance policies for added benefits to student athletes is overboard in most schools who try to operate legitimately. You must wear clothes on casual clothes day. My school had a uniform, most Aussie ones do. And so once a term we would have a casuals day for charity. One fateful day, I'm thinking about what to wear for it. And I realized, there is literally no rule saying I have to wear regular people clothes. So I showed up in a full ducking suit of armor. The next year, I checked the school rulebook and what do you know? Casual clothes day now has restrictions. No patting the tourists. Miso works at a wildlife park in Australia. She was showing a group of foreigners a koala and was continually telling them not to touch its head, because it didn't like it and might bite. This one woman kept on trying to touch its head and the koala started getting impatient and fidgety. So gets frustrated and pats the tourist on the head and says, "See, how do you like it?" Edit. If you guys have any more questions feel free to ask. She's enjoying answering them all. Not really a rule, but all of the bus routes were switched around so no one would have to cross the street after I got hit by a truck while boarding in my freshman year. Employees are not allowed onto the delivery truck to count off their truck order. I was 18. Working full-time at Hardee's. My glorious manager felt to bestow one of her duties on me as she was lazy and mostly incompetent. I was tasked of counting off items on the truck and putting them up. After I finished counting, I made my way down the ramp from the trailer. The ramp gave way and down I went with it. I landed on my chest. My chin bounced off the spikes on the ramp, this busting my chin open. I rolled off the ramp onto the nasty wet pavement while the truck driver finds me with blood running down my neck. 5 minutes later I'm helped into my manager's car and rushed to the ER for stitches. 2 weeks later my district manager made that rule and tried to fire me for it, but soon realized that it would have done more harm than good. You can't sign your own field trip slips if you're over 18 anymore. Why? 17-year-old me lied and said I was 18 because I thought it was dumb that I had to bring it to my parents when they told me to forge theirs anyways. So I signed my own, but of course I needed to leave halfway through to go to a class on the other side of town and ended up fessing up. So they changed the rules to require parental permission in all cases. My high school physics class had a balsa wood bridge building competition. All they supplied was the wood and you were responsible for the glue and the design. I let it be known that a family friend worked for 3M and anyone interested could get whatever glue they needed from me. Nobody took me up on this offer. Consulted with my father, a mechanical engineer, on the design, and my tiny bridge ended up holding over 200 pounds. I believe second place held maybe 30-40 pounds. Teacher ended up accusing me of cheating and essentially soaking the bridge in superglue or some sheet. I ended up having to share first place with the runner-up. And from that year forward the school provided both wood and glue. Not really a rule, but maybe it fits. One summer years ago I was working the local amusement park. That year they seemed to like having me work the stand that sold fruit punch and lemonade, trying to think of generic name but not working. Slurpees. Often park guests would request a mixture of the flavors, and then depending on who was working you could end up with half red half white, or it could end up layered like a candy cane. One day I had a decent sized line but nothing too crazy. They asked for a mixed version so I layered it up. Gave them the drink. They paid and off they went. That's when a guy in a suit who had been standing off to the side that I hadn't noticed walked up. Seemed important due to the rest of his posse. Turns out was either seer or vice seer, can't remember as it's been 20ish years. He asked what I had just given the guest. I explained sometimes we're asked for a mixture. He asked what we called it. I kinda shrugged. Well, sometimes candy cane because of what it looks like, but that's misleading flavor wise, so I typically just say pink lemonade. The group left and I didn't think anything else about it. Then about a week later I'm walking up to the stand to set it up for the day and something seems off. It's different. Then I notice it. There used to be 2 signs hanging in the front to order from, but now there's 3. Fruit punch, pink lemonade and lemonade. Later that summer I gave away a small water cup of the lemonade Slurpee to an employee on their break on a day that was about 100F. Fired for theft at the end of my shift after they had me clean everything. Not me, but my aunt. Her whole family went on a trip to Washington DC. And was touring the White House. This was just after Kennedy's assassination. So all the tour guides were tense and on edge. Suddenly and out of nowhere, there's a loud bang. And the employees are scared out of their wits until they realize the source, my then very young aunt, who was holding the remains of a balloon that had just popped. The next time her family visited DC, there was a sign posted, "No balloons." No use of proxy servers on school computers. We had a guy eat the entire district's bandwidth pirating things with a proxy on the school Wi-Fi. You may only enter and exit classrooms using doors, except during a fire or the like. I used to work at a college radio station. There is now an express rule that even during vacation shifts, where you can play whatever music you want as long as it isn't Christmas music, you aren't allowed to play songs from the theme's catalog. I had a late night vacation shift my sophomore year, and in a moment of boredom I decided to play a song from the playlist. 1 became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became the whole playlist of like over 150 TV show themes, from shows from the 1950s to the early 2000s. I forgot that the station broadcast across campus and into the South Boston area. So everyone listening got to hear 3 hours of TV show themes instead of normal music. The courthouse in Little Switzerland, PA has a plaque on the door that says "No monkeys," still to this day. My great grandmother would show up to visit her dad, who was a judge, and she would bring her pet Capuchin. Apparently there was an incident. No speaking about the amazing hot dog deal at Costco during class. It's not my fault that it is such a good deal. Something similar happened in my high school. There was a coffee shop across the road from our high school that gave free cookies and hot drinks for half price during lunch to anyone in school uniform. The only issue is that high schoolers weren't allowed to leave school grounds until the final bell. So after hearing people complain about the useless deal for a few weeks, the school banned us from bringing it up. Socks were added to the dress code. There were already rules regarding various types of shoes, but nothing about having to wear socks. Pretty sure it was a rule before me, but it was definitely enforced after me. No climbing on the outside of residences. Made an offhand remark one day that I could probably climb Mac Hall. Someone called me out. Made it to 5th floor before realizing that if I made it to the top the door would probably be locked, so I came back down. If you spend more than $5,000 annually on business expenses, you must use a corporate credit card. Company of nearly 100,000 employees. I put $45,000 plus on my personal card 1 year for the sweet reward points. Employees are all expected to be at the Christmas party. I was top dog at my last job and didn't attend the last few years I was there. Call me standoffish, but there were many I didn't feel like socializing with. It bothered my boss, and nobody gets a pass on it anymore. In 8th grade we knew at the end of the school year. Every year, 8th graders watched Star Wars on one of the last days. This was when movies were on VHS. Some friends and I got the idea to steal the movie for the teacher's file cabinet and record some porn over the movie during the last few minutes of the flick. We successfully put the plan in action and waited. Months went by and we knew it was going to happen. Day of the movie came up and we watched intently. Near the end of the movie 5 seconds of hardcore penetration came on the screen as we silently rejoiced and Star Wars proceeded. The teacher didn't know what happened. The guys in the class knew it was going to happen, and the girls weren't sure what just happened. No more movies for 8th grade ever again. I do feel bad for the teacher because she apologized through tears the next day to the class. One of the girls got wind of our devious plot and ratted us out. Parents were called. With extra credit, I was running a 110% in a class I was taking pass-fail. So anyway, the final exam was worth 30% of our grade. I decided to skip it and take the 80% overall grade and pass. The professor implemented a new rule where if the student does not take the midterm or final, he or she automatically fails the class or gets an incomplete with no credit. Not so much a rule, as it was a regulation change, but I think it still applies. Basically, when I was a toddler my family was going on a plane. It was a big plane, so we were using one of those extendable tunnel things to get into the plane. We had a lot of luggage, so my mom wasn't holding my hand, but she was keeping a close eye on me. She turned away for a second, and I went up to the terminal and hit a button. This button just so happened to be the one to retract the tunnel. They later increased the height of those terminals. While I probably wasn't the only one responsible for that change, I like to think I helped. New trainees at a specific holiday and only get a portion of the tips instead of dividing the tips equally. That's always so shitty. You should be able to keep the tips you earn. At Home Depot, whenever someone really wanted to tip me for my work or knowledge, I'd have to help them to their car before I could take it, otherwise I could have been fired on the spot basically. My high school welding teacher banned corn nuts from his classroom shop because of me. I brought them in and one by one more kids started eating them. He thought they smelled gross and put a sign up saying no corn nuts allowed. For club selection at my school, we would fill out a Google form online. The form didn't have any requirements besides a name, a first, second and third choice, with upperclassmen getting priority. So, I filled out the form about 400 times with my name set as neck wrinkles, with every wrinkle being set as a senior. They didn't catch it until clubs were announced. and every club except for the trash pickup club was filled fully with neck wrinkles. Forced them to redo it 3 days later. Except everyone had to use their student ID number to fill out the form. At my school everyone's email was their first name and then their ID number. Entire senior class has a shared document on Google Drive about senior events throughout the year. I go on there, collect everyone's ID number and filled out the form with everyone's name and put the entire senior class in the Gay Straight Alliance Club. Again. They made the form and this time you had to sign into your email to fill out the form. My first job was at a Taco Bell when I was in high school. I figured out that when you pressed the employee discount button, it simply halved the price of the entire order. And would repeat that halving over and over if you hit the subtotal button then the employee discount button again. Even though this was the mid-90s. The registers were from the early 1980s and were very primitive. I used to reduce my own meals down to a few pennies. And told a few of my close co-workers who I could trust about it. Then suddenly a few months later, the rule changed that only a manager was allowed to ring employees up. Because they discovered during audits that someone had been charging meals as low as a few hundred thousandths of a penny. And someone finally spotted the extended digit past the decimal point on the audit sheets. Company policy said you were considered late unless sick time was used. So I was using 10-15 minutes of sick time a few times a month so I wasn't late. Tried to write me up after I was late X amount of times. Showed them the policy. And a few hours later it was changed in our company wiki. My apartment complex was upgrading things and signed off promised things to us. They didn't come through and when we refused to leave the loaner apartment until the items were complete, they drastically changed the list of items that they would promise to the next people and no longer gave a loaner apartment. Because not fulfilling their promise is easier than accommodating their long-term tenants.